I'm Angela.
And I'm Paige.
Join us as we dive into our obsession with true crime, history, and mysterious stories. We'll explore the intricate details of the corrupt, the cruel, and the calculating.
We assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this episode. The Corrupt podcast is based on the facts and our opinions of the case. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Corrupt podcast.
Rodney Alcala is an American serial killer, known as the dating game killer. Rodney raped, kidnapped, and murdered throughout the United States for over 10 years. This episode does include graphic details on sexual assault, including the assault of minors. We will be splitting this case into two parts due to the amount of content.
Rodrigo Rodney Jacques Alcala Bacor was born in San Antonio, Texas on Monday, August 23, 1943. Rodney was one of 4 children. When Rodney was 8 years old, his maternal grandmother became ill and wanted to spend her last couple of years in Mexico, so the family packed up and moved to Mexico. While in Mexico, Rodney's father left the family and moved back to the United States. Rodney's grandmother passed away 3 years later, and the family moved to Los Angeles. Rodney graduated high school in 1960 and joined the Air Force on June 19, 1961. Rodney's older brother was already attending West Point. Rodney was sent to North Carolina, where he trained to become a paratrooper. While in the military, Rodney's IQ was tested. He scored over 140, which put him in the genius range.
Later, Rodney is tested again, and his IQ is actually closer to 170. And for reference here, an average person has an IQ of 100.
Rodney's father passed away suddenly in 1962.
Rodney's father was only 55 years old. The obituary said that he passed away suddenly while at a hospital on January 8, 1962. About 2 years after joining the Air Force, Rodney just appeared at his mother's home. Rodney had hitchhiked from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to his mother's house in Los Angeles. He had gone AWOL.
He went cray-cray.
He did. His mother eventually convinces Rodney to turn himself in, and after being interviewed by a military psychologist, Rodney was hospitalized. He was admitted to the Marine Corps Base Hospital in El Toro, California. Rodney's mother visited him every day for several months. In February 1964, Rodney was discharged from the military. He was diagnosed with chronic, severe antisocial personality disorder. He returned to his mother's house and soon applied to the California State University for photography. Rodney received his Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree from UCLA in 1968. The first attack occurred on Wednesday, September 25, 1968. 8-year-old Tally Shapiro was walking along Sunset Boulevard at a little past 8 a.m. on her way to Gardner Street Elementary School. Tally was temporarily living at the Chateau Marmont Hotel because her home had burned down in a fire. Her parents thought she was catching the bus to school, but Tally thought the bus was creepy and had actually been walking to school. On that morning, Rodney pulled his car beside Tally and offered her a ride to school. Tally knew that she shouldn't talk to strangers, but Rodney told her that he wasn't a stranger, he knew her parents. The whole time he's talking to Tally, he's driving his car slowly beside of her. Eventually, Tally gets in the car after Rodney says he has a beautiful picture to show her. Tally agrees to go to Rodney's house to see the picture, but tells him that she only has an hour before school. At the same time that Rodney was driving beside of Tally, Donald Haynes was driving on Sunset Boulevard on his way to work. Donald watched a man drive slowly behind a little girl, then pull up, and eventually the girl gets in the car. Donald pulled over, then decided to follow the vehicle. Donald saw Rodney and Tally get out of the vehicle and go into the apartment. It seemed to Donald that Tally was hanging back as if she was uncertain about going in the house. Once Tally enters the house, Donald goes to a payphone to call the police. Donald told the police officer that it might be crazy, but something didn't seem right, and within minutes, the police arrived. Detective Camacho knocked on the door. Rodney eventually answered, but asked for a minute because he was just getting out of the shower. To the detective, Rodney appeared to be naked, but not wet, and Detective Camacho thought he could hear moaning. He told Rodney to open the door right now or he was going to kick it down. And there was no answer, so Detective Camacho kicked the door down. It was too late to catch Rodney as he had escaped in the time it took the detective to kick down the door. Following a trail of blood from the living room to the kitchen, police officers found Tally on the kitchen floor. She had been raped and beaten. There was a metal bar like a dumbbell across her neck. So Tally was rushed to the hospital where she received 27 stitches on her head. She spent almost a month in the hospital, then several months bedbound at home. Eventually, Tally was able to go back to school, but by that time, it was halfway through the school year. And the last thing Tally remembers is Rodney showing her a picture. Presumably, this is when Tally is hit in the back of the head. In his hurry to get out the window and escape, Rodney left behind his ID. So the police knew his real name, and they were also able to confirm that he was a student at UCLA.
Rodney appeared all the way across the United States in New York. He applied to New York State University School of Arts under the alias John Berger. Even though the semester had already started and NYU was highly selective, Rodney was accepted to the undergraduate School of Arts. Rodney worked as a security guard to pay his tuition between 1968 and 1971.
During his time at NYU, Rodney, who's going by John, was known to be courteous and he had a lot of friends.
Rodney applied for an art and drama camp counselor position during his summer break in July 1969. Rodney was asked back for multiple years, and he would be a counselor in the summer of 1969, 1970, and 1971. Rodney Alcala, still going as John Berger, graduated from NYU in June 1971. I'm really wondering how he did that. Like, don't you have to submit your social security number, like when you attend a college?
Probably not in 1969.
Okay, so you can just show up willy-nilly and be like, hey, I'm John Berger. This is me.
And he did have a good relationship with the admissions officer at NYU. They interviewed every single candidate to go to NYU. And so he won her over just with the, I need help. Can you assist me with this? He was really charismatic to her. And
He's buttering her up.
He buttered her up. I think she opened a lot of doors for him.
Yeah. Cornelia Crilly, known as Michael to her friends, was a flight attendant. At 23 years old, Michael had met two friends at Flight Attendant Academy, and they moved into an apartment together in New York City. The girls were moving into a new apartment on June 24, 1971. Michael was in charge of taking possession of the new apartment and the moving crew as her roommates were on a flight that day. Michael called her mother to tell her about the apartment. They ended the call saying they would talk again in a couple hours. Michael then called her sister to see if she could come help with the new furniture, but her sister was preparing to take college exams and said she would have to come over in a couple of days. A few hours later, when Michael's mother called back, she was unable to reach Michael. Eventually, she called Michael's boyfriend, Leon Borstein. Leon attempted to get into the apartment, but eventually contacted the police. The police followed Leon to the apartment where they found Michael's body in the second bedroom. She had been raped and murdered. Undergarments had been stuffed into Michael's mouth. There were bite marks on her breasts. DNA was collected and stored from saliva left behind. There were no signs of a break-in, leading law enforcement to believe Michael had known her attacker. Leon was interviewed by police for 2 hours as a possible suspect. Eventually, Leon was cleared. There were no other suspects in Michael's murder.
Rodney was working for the third year as a camp counselor in August 1971. Two girls attending the camp walked to the post office to mail letters home. While at the post office, they looked over posters and signs. One of the posters was of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, and there was a photo of Rodney Alcala. The girls thought Rodney looked very similar to their counselor, John Berger, but wrote it off as a coincidence. When they got back to camp, they mentioned the poster to the camp director. The director drove to the post office to look at the poster. He felt that it did look like John. He called the FBI number on the poster from the post office, and an agent was at the camp by the next morning. Rodney was arrested and flown back to LA on August 12, 1971. When detectives asked Rodney why he had attacked Tally, Rodney responded by saying, "I don't want to talk about Rodney Alcala and what he did."
So he was like still in John Berger mode?
Yeah, he's referring to himself in third person. It's very strange. And it's not the only time that he's going to refer to himself in third person.
What kind of name? If you had to pick a name, why would you pick John Berger? Like, really?
It's pretty simple.
John Berger. Sounds like booger. Rodney, dumb piece of... I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, he's trash. On May 19th, 1972, Rodney was sentenced for the attack on Tolly. Tolly's family was out of the country and wouldn't allow her to be a witness on the stand. And Tolly later says that she's thankful for this. She can't remember the attack and agrees with her parents for sheltering her from the trial.
I'm sure that the attack was also like very traumatic for her. And it could have been like a traumatic response to not even remember that.
Absolutely. Plus, he hit her in the back of the head. So I'm not sure if that's part of the memory loss, but I think you're right. It's just such a traumatic situation that happened to her at such a young age that she's just kind of blocked it out, which I think is great. I don't think that, anyone would want her to remember this.
Right.
Even though Rodney had been on the FBI's most wanted list, he was still able to take a plea deal. He pleads guilty to child molestation and received an indeterminate sentence. And this is a unique thing. An indeterminate sentence allowed parole boards to review the case on rehabilitation, but also allowed some offenders to be released quickly. So his sentence, for example, would basically be 1 year to life in prison.
Talk through that a little bit more because I'm still confused about it.
So they're saying if you go into prison and you're like, I'm going to do all of the programs that they want me to do. I'm going to work on rehabilitating and walk the line that they want me to walk. He could be out in a year. If he goes in and he's constantly starting fights, he's not doing what they're asking him to do, he's not showing any signs of progress, very similar to parole now, right? You have to kind of prove to them that you should qualify for parole. In this case, it's not really parole. It's just that's your sentence. Like you could spend a year in prison. You could spend the rest of your life in prison, depending on what the board
decides.
What they decide. Yep, exactly. In Rodney's case, he was released from prison and out on parole in August of 1974. He was required to register as a sex offender, but he served less than 3 years for his attack on Tolly. He moved back in with his mother and took a photographer job.
Pathetic. This is pathetic. In my opinion, he molested Tolly, who was only 8 years old, and thank goodness she wasn't murdered, but he still deserved to rot in prison longer than for what he did.
I agree. I think 3 years is a drop in the bucket when you think about the fact that if the innocent bystander hadn't seen her, hadn't followed her, that bar was laying across her neck. That's attempted murder. This isn't a sex offender type crime. This is murder. I agree. This is one of many times that Rodney gets off that he just should not. The courts really just always err in his favor, which is amazing.
On October 13th, 1974, Rodney, who was going by another alias, John Ronald, picked up 13-year-old Julie Johnson in his car. Rodney offered to give Julie a ride to school, and they discussed how Julie looks much younger than her 13 years, which is odd to me because most men, in my opinion, as I've seen or seen on television, they always tell younger girls that they look older than what they seem. Do you get that too?
I get that. I thought it was interesting as well that he was trying to make her younger. He's definitely showing his pedophile colors here. He wants her to be more along the lines of 8, like Tally, I think, which is just disgusting.
Instead of dropping her off at school, he drove her to Huntington Beach. Ignoring her requests to be dropped off at school and several attempts to run away, John forced Julie to smoke weed with him and then attempted to force himself on her when a park ranger spotted them. Julie told the park ranger that she was there against her will, but Rodney said that she had supplied him the weed and it was consensual. The ranger arrested both of them and did a background check, eventually figuring out that John Ronald was actually Rodney Alcala. How are you going to arrest a 13-year-old? 31-year-old guy with a 13-year-old girl, and you're going to arrest both of them? Like, that's not suspicious at all?
Yeah, the park ranger actually does arrest both of them. He takes them and puts them both in cells and interviews them separately. And the whole time, Julie is saying, I'm here against my will. I've been kidnapped. He's forcing drugs on me. He's forcing himself on me. And the ranger doesn't really believe her until he figures out that it's Rodney Alcala. Isn't that strange?
Oh, since now I see that you're, a registered sex offender, it's now your fault.
Exactly. Now I'm going to believe the 13-year-old.
Rodney was taken back to jail and on December 26, 1974, was found guilty of violating his parole and providing a minor with drugs. He would spend 2.5 years in prison for this parole violation before being released in June 1977.
Again, he's not charged with kidnapping. He's just charged with violating his parole. He just keeps weaseling out of the court system here.
Yeah, in my opinion, I would want his ding-a-ling soldered off.
Exactly. Now he's showing a little bit of an MO. There's an attack of a 8-year-old followed by an attack of a 13-year-old. They should have been looking at him more closely than 2.5 years in prison for violating parole and then just being released again.
Rodney requested to visit some relatives in New York, and his parole officer granted the request. He spent around a month in New York during the summer of 1977. 23-year-old Ellen Hover went missing from NYC in 1977. Ellen had recently graduated college after majoring in biology with a minor in music. She was an heiress and socialite in New York City. On July 13, 1977, Ellen's boyfriend saw her talking to a man with a ponytail outside her Manhattan apartment. When asked about the man, Ellen said he was a flirty, chatty photographer. On July 15th, neighbors saw the same man knock on Ellen's door. Ellen didn't show up for dinner with a friend or call her mother like she usually did. The phone rang and rang with no answer. The next day, her mother called the police. The police found no evidence of break-in or a struggle. Ellen had simply disappeared. In Ellen's diary for July 15th, she had written, John Berger, photographer. Her family posted a $100,000 reward for information and hired a private investigator with no luck.
Son of Sam was also killing couples in NYC at the same time Ellen disappeared, and 17,000 people were reported missing in New York City annually. Sadly, Ellen's body would be found 11 months later buried under rocks.
Jill Barcombe was one of 11 children. In October 1977, she loaded into a van with friends and drove from New York to Los Angeles. Soon after arriving in LA, her friend's van was repossessed and the friends returned to New York. Jill decided to stay in LA, telling her family that she was loving her new life.
Jill's body was found on November 10, 1977. She had been strangled by hands, ligatures, then hit with a large pointed rock on her head. She was sexually abused, and DNA was taken in as evidence. Jill's body was posed as well. Jill was buried on November 16, 1977. She was just shy of her 19th birthday. The fact that her body was posed was an important MO for law enforcement. At the time, LA had 20 or more serial killers targeting the area. Jill was originally included as a victim of the Hillside Stranglers, 2 men that were convicted of strangling 10 women in LA and leaving their bodies on hillsides around the area. The Hillside Stranglers did not pose their victims' bodies, but used the 5-point ligature marks as their MO. The 5 points were ties to the victim's neck, both wrists, and both ankles. Jill would be removed from the Hillside Strangler victim list officially in 2005.
Do you think he posed these bodies for photography reasons?
It's possible. I think it's a power game with him as well. He's posing their bodies in very provocative ways, and this is definitely a sexually oriented crime. It's just something that he's getting power from. A lot of the victims will have their legs wide open, aimed at a doorway, for example, so that when people come in the door, the first person that sees them, that's what they're seeing.
It's disgusting.
On December 14th, 1977, the FBI contacted LAPD about Ellen Hover's disappearance. The name John Berger was written in her diary, and the FBI had record of a prior hunt for Rodney Alcala and his John Berger alias. Rodney is called into the LAPD, where he admits to meeting Ellen on July 15th. Rodney says that he took photos of Ellen, then left her at her apartment door. The LAPD have no evidence to hold Rodney, so they have to let him go. Georgia Wickstead was 27 years old when she was murdered on December 15, 1977. In her junior year of high school, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. When the tumor was removed, it was found to be benign, but the very next year, another tumor was found. After her time in 2 hospitals, Georgia decided she wanted to become a nurse. She worked as a medical assistant and eventually put herself through nursing school. Georgia took a cardiac care position at Centinela Hospital, working the 3:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. shift. On December 15, 1977, Georgia had picked up her coworker Gail for work, and after their shift, they went to a bar for a birthday party. When Georgia dropped Gail off at 2 a.m. in Santa Monica, it was agreed that Georgia would pick her up before their 3:30 to 11:30 shift later that day. Gail waited, but Georgia never arrived to pick her up for work. After Gail's mother dropped her off at the hospital, Gail discovered that Georgia was also not at work. Gail called Georgia several times throughout the day, but Georgia didn't pick up the phone. Georgia's body was discovered in her Malibu apartment on December 16th. Police found Georgia lying on her back on the floor, with her legs bent into a diamond shape. She had been strangled with pantyhose and hit with a claw hammer to the head, resulting in severe trauma. She had been sexually assaulted, and again, semen was collected as DNA evidence. A palm print on the brass bed rail and 2 different blood samples were also collected as evidence. Georgia's brother Mike arrived home from the military and cleaned out Georgia's apartment. He found blood throughout the apartment, on the side of the bed, on clothes, on the floor. He boxed up everything without blood and left the rest. Meanwhile, Rodney, who was working as a typesetter for the LA Times, was partying his night away in the bars. And I'm going to assume that that's how Rodney saw Georgia, was he met her at the bar that night and followed her home.
Oh, for sure. And poor Mike having to do that. I feel for him. I would have done the same thing. I don't even know if I would be able to go to the apartment.
To go in the apartment and see your sister's blood all over, throughout, the sheer amount of trauma for him there. It's really sad. It's not a situation he should have had to be in.
In March 1978, the Hillside Stranglers Task Force interviewed every sex offender in the area, including Rodney. Rodney had an alibi for every Hillside Stranglers attack, and they felt he was clear. Law enforcement did find Rodney in possession of marijuana, and he was sent back to jail for 2.5 years for the drug possession.
Take a moment here and think about how crazy it is that there were so many active serial killers in California that the task force for one serial killer interviewed another serial killer and didn't even know it.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
Absolutely. It's wild, the amount of serial killers that are in California at this time.
It's sort of insane to think about because in the 1970s, serial killers were at their peak, and there were nearly 300 known active serial killers. Did you know this?
I did not know.
That's crazy.
I didn't know that the number was so high. I also didn't know that there were so many in California until, this goes back to our first episode on GSK, how many serial killers California alone was fighting. Not just the Golden State Killer, not just Hillside Stranglers. I actually want to do an episode on this later of the psychology. Was there legitimately something in the water here? What is happening to make them all flock to California?
Yeah, and in the 1980s, there were more than 250, and by 2010, there were fewer than 50 known active serial killers. So statistically, serial killers are declining. Yeah, I don't know if if the serial killers are becoming more stealthier or just more advances in police investigation and data collection. What do you think?
I think it's the forensic side. We're catching them faster. It's a lot harder to be stealthy now. There's crazy amount of CCTV cameras. You've got DNA. Even you think about your grandchild could submit DNA and it catches you for something that happened 20, 30 plus years ago.
Busted.
Absolutely.
On June 23rd, 1978, 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb invited a friend to go out to a bar with her. Her friends declined the invite, but Charlotte said that she would just go by herself to check out the new Moody's Club in Santa Monica. On June 24th and June 26th, Charlotte's car was issued citations for parking illegally in a garage overnight. The car was towed and impounded on June 29th. On June 26th, Charlotte's sister called to wish Charlotte a happy birthday. Charlotte did not answer the phone, and she didn't talk to anyone in her family either.
Charlotte's family lives in Troy, Ohio, and they begged her multiple times to move back, but she always laughed it off, saying that she would just be bored stiff.
And it's also sad to think that it was like her birthday. She asked her friends to go out, and they declined. Not on her birthday, but around her birthday.
Yeah, they did. They decided that they wanted to just stay in for the night. And she was like, that's okay, I'll go by myself. And it's another bar connection. Again, I think Rodney saw her at the bar and followed her home.
On June 24th, a woman's body was discovered in the laundry room of an apartment building in El Segundo. There was a delay in Charlotte being identified because there is a 25-minute drive from Santa Monica Club and her own apartment to the apartment in El Segundo. She had been raped and strangled. There was severe trauma to Charlotte's face and head. The ligature at her neck was pulled so tight that it fractured her voice box cartilage and thyroid. Semen was collected as DNA evidence, but just like the other attacks, the police were just cataloging the evidence without ways to test it. Charlotte's body had been posed with her legs toward the laundry room door and her hands behind her back. Police in New York City located the body of Ellen Hover in June 1978. After the NYPD Missing Persons Squad had interviewed Rodney, and he admitted to spending time with Ellen on that day of her disappearance, the NYPD then interviewed everyone who had been in contact with Rodney while he was in New York. One person said that Rodney liked to watch the sunset over the Hudson River. The NYPD narrowed down the possible area to a 600-acre lot and searched the land 24 times before they discovered a shallow grave with Ellen Hover's remains. Ellen had been missing for just under a year. The police were stuck with no hard evidence to link Rodney to Ellen's murder.
Law enforcement is just simply amazing. It must have been so disheartening to them to narrow this down to 600 acres and then go out 23 times without finding anything. They kept at it and they found her on that 24th trip.
Phenomenal. On September 13th, 1978, Rodney earned his nickname as the dating game killer. He appeared as contestant number 1 on the dating game show. Cheryl Bradshaw was the lead contestant with her choice of 3 bachelors to interview. In her interview of the bachelors, Cheryl first asked what the bachelor's favorite time was. Rodney responded by saying nighttime, because nighttime is when it gets good. That's when you're really ready. In another question, Cheryl says that she's serving the bachelors for dinner. What type of food are they? Rodney responds that he is a banana, and he looks really good. Cheryl asks him to be more descriptive, and then he says, peel me.
It was so disturbing to watch, I'm not going to lie.
I cringed so badly when I watched it. Like,
We'll list the 9-minute dating game YouTube link in our episode notes. We want to hear from you guys. It's worth checking out to get the full picture of just who Rodney was. Of Cheryl's 3 options, Rodney is really the most charismatic. He seems like a clear and easy winner, and the audience can see him the whole time. So they see his charming smile. He's got this long brown hair. He's really handsome. He's cool, calm, and collected, where the other contestants seem to be sweating it a little bit more. To me, though, when you're watching this, the real winner to me is number 2. First off, he's not a serial killer. And he seems like a great guy, so just all bonuses there, right? She asks contestant number 2, what's the difference between a soldier and a sailor? And on the fly, in front of a live audience, he says, a soldier never gets his feet wet, which I thought was pretty clever. And he was spot on, right?
I thought he delivered it well. In my mind, I'm still thinking, well, a soldier gets his feet wet.
That's
like,
true.
Right? Technically.
Yeah, they do. And everything was like an innuendo. So I sat back and I was like, is there a double meaning to this question? Like, am I missing something here? It was kind of cheesy.
Did Cheryl come up with those questions as well herself? Or no?
I'm not sure if she came up with them herself or not. It's definitely different than the Woman of the Hour movie, which we'll get into at the end. But I know in the movie, she's handed some questions and then she goes on her own. In real life, it seems like she's reading these questions, but if she drafted them herself, I'm not sure. And Cheryl's passed away, so it's not something we could ask.
Yeah, it would also be number 2 for me as well. Yeah. Number 3, poor guy.
I know.
His heart was in it, but he was just cringe all the way.
She made him sing even. I thought she was really hard on contestant number 3.
She was.
Cheryl selects Rodney Alcala for her date. They win tennis lessons and Magic Mountain amusement park tickets. Trusting her instincts, Cheryl does not go on the date with Rodney. She told the Sunday Telegraph in 2012, quote,
"I started to feel ill. He was actually really creepy. I didn't want to see him again."
Cheryl described Rodney as obnoxious, rude, and intimidating. Rodney pulled his car next to 15-year-old Monique Hoyt on February 13, 1979. He asked Monique if she would like to be entered in a photo contest, and Monique hopped in the car. It was getting dark, so Rodney took Monique to his mother's house where she spent the night. The next morning, Rodney drove Monique 80 miles away and walked her into the woods. He took some photos, then asked if she would be comfortable taking some nude photos. He had her pull her shirt over her head for the next photo, then hits her in the head with a tree branch, knocking her unconscious. When Monique wakes up, Rodney is raping her. She screams and he chokes her until she loses consciousness again. When Monique wakes up the second time, she's tied up with rope and Rodney is laying beside of her crying. Monique is incredibly smart and she asks him not to tell anyone about the rape, and she turns the tables by asking if he's okay. Rodney unties her and leads her back to his car. They stop for Rodney to use the bathroom, and once he's inside, Monique runs for a motel for help. They called 911, but Rodney had already driven off. Monique was able to identify Rodney by name and his address, and when interviewed by police, Rodney admits to the rape and is arrested. Prosecutors requested a $50,000 bail, but the bail is set for $10,000, which Rodney's mother posts for him. This is so infuriating to me. He's been in jail for child molestation, drug offense. He's violating his parole. Now they've got him for rape of a child, a 15-year-old child, and they set the bail at $10,000.
Bile is coming up in my throat just thinking about it. I know that's her son and everything, but really?
Mm-hmm.
She's going to bail him out after all of what he did. She has to know that he has the history with rape, right?
They never believe the accusations against him. Later on, when DNA is linking him to things, his family still gets on the stand and defends him tooth and nail. They never believe that he does this. They never believe that he's guilty.
Still, I would leave his ass there.
And I wish she did. Yeah.
I would do more than just leave his ass there, but I'm not a corrupted mind.
Guess simmer down on that corruption.
That's why I have you, Paige, reeling me back in.
Just got somebody to reel you back in all the time.
Whoa, Angela, you're not that corrupted. Jill Parenteau went to a Dodgers game on June 13th, 1979 at 7:30 p.m., then returned to her apartment in Burbank, California. Jill was 22 years old and a supervisor over a data entry department. On Thursday, June 14th, 1979, Jill's every morning phone call to her friend, Kathy Bowman, was missed. Kathy thought Jill had maybe gone into work early, so she waited and tried calling Jill at work. Jill had also not come into work that day. Janet Jordan, one of Jill's coworkers, volunteered to drive over and check on her. Janet called the police after discovering Jill's body in the bedroom. Jill had been raped and strangled. Her body was lying on the floor of the bedroom, with her legs aimed at the doors and her shoulders and upper back propped up on pillows. A lamp cord was wrapped around her neck. Rodney had removed window panels and cut the window screen to enter Jill's apartment. He had also removed the light bulb from the exterior stairway.
By this point in the case, I am so over Rodney Alcala. He is a despicable human being. He really is a piece of shit.
Preach it.
To give you the full extent of Rodney's acts, The coroner report for Jill says that she has severe trauma to the head with an object broader than a hammer, or her head had been slammed into a flatter object, or a human fist was used against her head. Her nylons were knotted around her neck so tightly that blood vessels in her eyes ruptured and caused hemorrhaging of her thyroid and voice box. She had been raped orally, vaginally, and anally. The coroner report states that most of the wounds were inflicted while Jill was still alive. Again, DNA evidence is collected, but it's held.
He really is a piece of shit.
It's horrible. Reading and digging into this case, the things that he does, he would strangle these women until they pass out. Then he would revive them, torture them, strangle them again, and repeat it until eventually he murders them. Like, it's horrifying.
That's like an extra step in the murder. Like, it's not only the murder itself, but it's their suffering.
Absolutely. Over and over again.
Just 6 days after Jill Parenteau's murder, on June 19th, Rodney was at Huntington Beach. He approached 15-year-old Tony Esparza and 14-year-old Joanne Merchlin and asked if he could take their picture for a contest. He had the girls pose in different ways over 7 or 8 photos. Rodney asked the girls for their phone numbers in case they won, but they wouldn't provide this information. Rodney then asked for their addresses, but the girls again declined to provide the information. Rodney climbed back into his car and asked if they wanted to go and get loaded. The girls knew this was definitely bad news, and they roller skated away from Rodney as fast as they could.
The following day, on June 20th, Rodney continued to prowl the Huntington Beach area. Lorraine Wirtz and Patty Enmendorf were roller skating at Sunset Beach, 11 minutes north of Huntington Beach. When it was time to catch the bus to head back home, Patty decided she had better hit the bathroom before getting on the bus. Right after Patty skated away, Rodney pulled up and asked to take Lorraine's photo. He took several photos of Lorraine and then started asking personal questions about where she lived, her age, and if she had a boyfriend. Lorraine knew something wasn't right, and as soon as Patty came back from the bathroom, they also skated away as quickly as they could. Unfortunately, not everyone would be so lucky on June 20th, 1979. Robin Samsoe and her friend Bridget Wilbert decided to go to Huntington Beach that afternoon. Robin had just finished the 7th grade and was 12 years old. She loved ballet, and June 20th was the first day of her job answering phone calls at the ballet studio. Robin had attended ballet lessons and loved it, but her mother is in an accident and couldn't afford the lessons anymore. So it was arranged that Robin would answer calls at the studio for an hour in exchange for free classes, and Robin was really excited about this. While at the beach, a man walked up to the girls and asked to take their photo. A woman noticed a man taking photos of young girls and immediately felt that something was wrong. When she approached, Rodney never looked her in the face, but walked away without saying a word. It turned out that the woman was Bridget's neighbor. The neighbor talked to the girls about letting a stranger take their picture and walked them back to Bridget's house. Realizing that it was now 3:10 p.m., Robin asked to borrow Bridget's bicycle so she was not late for her first day of work and hustles out of the house, planning to bike the 1.5 miles to her house to grab her leotard. The bike ride should have taken 15 minutes, leaving her still plenty of time to reach the studio before her shift. By 5 p.m., Robin had still not shown up at the studio, and the studio contacted Robin's family. By 9:45 p.m., the police had been notified.
Witness Dana Croppa saw a dark-haired man forcefully steering a blonde girl toward a dry stream bed. Dana was on her way to work and thought it was strange but kept driving. Dana passed the same area the next day and saw the same Datsun. The second time she saw the man, he was leaning on a rock and he appeared to be covered in dirt.
On June 25th, Dana can't shake the feeling that something was wrong on Santa Anita Canyon Road, so she drives back over. Between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m., Dana finds a body in the ravine, but tells no one about what she found. Convinced that the bones must have been an animal, Dana goes back on June 29th and confirms that the bones are in fact human, but continues not reporting it.
On June 21st, Bridget worked with a police composite artist to create a drawing of the man they had met at the beach.
This photo shows a man with long curly hair, so Rodney went and had his hair chemically straightened. When that didn't work, he cut his hair short.
On June 26, investigators for Robin's disappearance received a call from Donald Haynes. The police ran Rodney's background and found that he was out on bail for rape and was also listed as a sexual deviant and a pedophile.
High five to Donald Haynes.
Yes.
He was our good Samaritan that saved Tally Shapiro's life in 1968, and here he is again, and he is spot on.
So he's not an investigator or a police officer or anything. He's just randomly...
Yeah, he's us.
And a couple... Oh, well, good for you, Donald.
Absolutely. He's very observant. Tony Esparza and Joanne Merchland went to the police station to report their June 19th conversation with a man similar to the composite sketch. The girls were interviewed separately, and when shown a photo of Rodney's mugshot, both agreed that it was the same man from June 19th. On July 2nd, Robin's remains were discovered by Dana Crappa's coworker, another firefighter. This firefighter reported the human remains within minutes of the discovery. The autopsy was completed on July 6th. Due to advanced decomposition, they were unable to confirm if Robin had been sexually assaulted or the cause of her death. Robin's dentist sent her dental records to the coroner, and it was confirmed the remains were 12-year-old Robin Samso. Sergeant Jenkins spoke to the reporter for LA Times about the lack of evidence showing Robin's cause of death, and he said, quote,
I don't think a healthy 12-year-old girl walked 50 miles into the hills and then just lay down and died.
On July 7th, investigators searched the area where Robin's body was found. They found multiple beer bottles, a knife, blonde hair, a 1-inch manila rope, 3-inch piece of bone, and a fingertip. They also found one blue and yellow tennis shoe. Written on the white rubber edge and canvas of the shoe, it said, Robin plus Ralph, Karen plus Jason, Wendy plus Alan. If the dental records didn't ID Robin, I think this clarifies that it was Robin's shoe and just how young she was.
Do you remember doing that to your shoe? Did you ever do that?
Not to my shoes. Did you do it to your shoes?
Yeah. I totally did that to my shoes. I mean, I didn't put people's names on it, but like I wrote on my shoes.
I bet your parents loved that.
They were cheap shoes.
I mean, they
cheap
still
parents,
buy them.
cheap shoes. No.
Oh, nice.
Just kidding. I love you, Mom and Dad. You supplied me with everything in this life. Thank you. Okay.
On July 11th, Rodney rented a storage unit in Seattle, Washington. He told his girlfriend that he was going to be moving to Dallas on July 24th to look for a better photography job. He told another friend that he was moving to Mexico.
Whoa. He has a girlfriend?
Oh, yeah.
He has a girlfriend.
He has a girlfriend that he's been holding on to for 3 months. Yep. On July 24th, law enforcement obtained a search warrant for Rodney's mother's home. They knocked on the door at 7:05 a.m. Rodney was still asleep in bed. During the search of the house, investigators found a receipt for the storage unit in Seattle, boxes of photos, handcuffs, blue nylon and manila rope, a pair of pink panties with black tape on both sides, 1,200 photos, negatives, and slides. The next day, investigators go back to the house to obtain that receipt for the storage unit, but it's gone. Rodney's mother says that she cleaned the room after the police left, and they could go through the trash if they want. Law enforcement does go through the trash, but that receipt is never seen again.
Is his mom's mind like blind to this stuff? Like, does she not see that the investigators found these things?
I think she's an accomplice here. She knew that he was being investigated for murder. She is not naive. I think she cleared out that room and probably did away with the trash or burned the trash, trying to keep him from being convicted.
Sounds like it.
Rodney was sent to Huntington Beach Jail, and instead of a $10,000 bond, this time it's set at $250,000.
Finally. About damn time. Rodney placed a phone call from jail to his sister Christine on the evening of July 24th. The call was recorded. Rodney mentioned a 5x5x10 storage unit several times. They switched from English to Spanish and whispered during the call. Investigators visited Christine the next morning. She said Rodney had been babysitting her kids on June 19th from 8 a.m. to 1 or 1:30 p.m.
This is the time when Rodney was taking photos of Tony Esparza and Joanne Merchland.
Rodney's mother was at Christine's home at the time. she presented investigators a phone bill showing a phone call from her home to Rodney's girlfriend on June 20th at 9:41 p.m. The phone call lasted 45 minutes. She said that it proved Rodney was innocent.
And again, this is Rodney's family covering for him over and over. So what if he was at home June 20th at 9:41 p.m.? Where was he at 4 p.m.? That phone call does not tell me anything. That's not...
No, just a he said, she said type of a thing.
Yep. At 4 p.m. when Robin goes missing. Okay, cool. So 5 hours later, you're at home making a phone call to your girlfriend.
Even without the receipt, investigators still figured out the storage unit address. On July 26, they flew to Seattle and searched the unit. They found some strange items in the unit, but the most notable items were a bag full of earrings, 1,700 photographs, a video labeled Tally VA Rape, and a second video labeled Ode to New York by John Berger. On the same day, Rodney had his arraignment hearing in Orange County, California. He was charged with kidnapping, lewd or lascivious acts upon a child under 14 years old, murder, and robbery. He was to be held without bail and was assigned a public defender. These charges are in addition to the February 1979 Riverside County rape charges for the kidnapping and rape of Monique Hoyt.
We're going to stop here for our first part on Rodney Alcala. Subscribe to catch the second and final episode. We would love for you to become part of the Corrupt crew. You can find us on Patreon with multiple tiers and PayPal. This will score you our appreciation and will announce your name in a future episode. Both links are in the episode notes. Case suggestions and feedback can be emailed to us at corruptpod@gmail.com.
The sources for this episode would be listed in the episode notes. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. Don't forget to subscribe to catch our new Corrupt content. Please also leave us a review wherever you're listening to this episode. Bye!
Bye!